Two American companies built the exact same money trick. One turned it into a private bank bigger than most real banks. The other used it to survive 1 year longer than it collapsed and took customers' money with it. It's called the float money a company collects today but doesn't have to spend or repay until much later, sometimes never. Both companies discovered it decades apart. Only one understood how dangerous it could become. Side 1, Starbucks. A coffee company that, without ever calling itself a bank, ended up holding more prepaid customer cash than dozens of actual regional banks combined. Side 2, Toys R Us. A toy retailer that sold gift cards to millions of parents for birthdays and holidays, cash it also never had to spend right away. By the 2010s, both piles of unspent customer money had grown into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Both companies now sat on cash they had never technically earned. Then their paths split completely. So what actually separates a trick that quietly builds an empire from one that quietly sinks a company? It isn't the amount of money sitting unused. It's what happens the moment customers all show up wanting it back at once and whether the company still has anywhere else to turn. One company turned that leftover cash into one of its most profitable, least talked about business lines. The other watched it evaporate the moment the company ran out of road. The idea starts in 2001. Starbucks launches a small reloadable plastic card. Customers preload cash onto it so they can skip the register line. Starbucks' original goal was simple: speed up the line and build loyalty. It wasn't trying to build a shadow bank. The float was a side effect nobody planned for. Nobody at Starbucks calls it a financial product. They call it convenience. But legally, every dollar loaded onto that card is now a liability the company owes back to the customer. Toys R Us had been running a similar idea for years: plastic gift cards sold at the register, loaded with cash for a future purchase that might never come. In both businesses, the math is identical. Customers hand over real money today. The company gets to hold it, invest it, or spend it before a single product changes hands, and that gap between payment and purchase is exactly where the hidden profit lies. For Starbucks, the card becomes an app in 2011. Now customers preload balances with a few taps, and reloading becomes almost automatic for millions of regulars. Every automatic reload is a tiny, invisible loan from the customer to the company, interest-free, with no due date, and often never fully collected. Toys R Us never builds an app people check every morning. Its gift cards sit forgotten in wallets and drawers, pulled out only once or twice a year at most. Same trick, same era, but Starbucks made this loop happen for millions of transactions a day, while Toys R Us caught only a fraction of that habit. Here's the part almost nobody clocks: not every dollar loaded onto a card actually gets redeemed. Some cards get lost. Some balances are too small to bother spending. Some are just forgotten. Accountants have a name for this unredeemed money: breakage. It's the gap between what customers paid in and what they ever actually claimed back in coffee or toys. Under U.S. accounting rules, once a company can reasonably estimate that a portion of card balances will never be redeemed, it's allowed to book that money as its own revenue. Picture what that estimate actually requires: teams of analysts studying years of redemption patterns, card by card, to calculate exactly how much of that unspent balance is safe to call permanent. It's not a guess, it's a formula, built on the quiet assumption that most people simply won't come back for their last few dollars. In one fiscal year alone, Starbucks recognized about $155 million in breakage cash from cards that customers loaded and then simply never spent. That's not a donation. It's not a tip. It's money that legally becomes Starbucks' own, the moment enough time passes and the odds of redemption fall low enough. Toys R Us books breakage too, but at a fraction of the scale, because far fewer people carry a toy store balance in their pocket every single day. The bigger a company's daily habit loop, the bigger its breakage. And nothing builds a daily habit loop like a $5 coffee people buy on their way to work. By the mid-2010s, Starbucks wasn't just selling coffee anymore. It was quietly running one of the most efficient stored cash operations of any consumer company on earth. By the mid-2010s, reporters digging through Starbucks' financial filings found something wild. The company was sitting on more than $1 billion in unspent card and app balances. That much customer cash, parked inside a coffee company, earning Starbucks interest and flexibility money that dozens of small, real banks would envy as deposits. To put that in perspective, many community banks across the United States hold less than $1 billion in total customer deposits. Starbucks, without a banking license, had already passed that number. Legally, Starbucks doesn't have to hold that cash in a separate, protected account the way a real bank must. It can use it to fund stores, pay staff, or expand. That's the twist almost no customer realizes when they reload their app. They aren't just prepaying for coffee. They're handing an unregulated bank an interest-free loan. And unlike a bank, Starbucks isn't required to ensure that money, or guarantee customers will always get it back if something ever goes seriously wrong. For most of Starbucks' history, that risk never mattered. The company kept growing, kept opening stores, kept redeeming cards without trouble, so the float just kept climbing. By the early 2020s, Starbucks counted more than 30 million active rewards members in the US alone, each one holding a balance that quietly refills the float. Every reload, every unused dollar, every forgotten balance adds to a pile of cash that functions almost exactly like a bank's deposit base, except nobody calls it that. It's a business model built entirely on human habit: buy coffee often enough, reload often enough, and eventually forget just enough change to make the system profitable, quietly, without anyone ever feeling like they lost anything. This is the survival side of the story. Now for the side that didn't make it, because the same trick, without the same habit loop, can turn into a trap. By 2017, Toys R Us was drowning not from bad toys, but from years of debt piled on by a leveraged buyout back in 2005. The company owed so much in interest payments that even steady toy sales couldn't keep up. In September 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. Millions of parents were still holding Toys R Us gift cards at that exact moment, plastic loaded with real money for birthdays, holidays, and half-finished Christmas lists. In a healthy company, that card balance is a harmless liability, quietly waiting to be redeemed. In a bankrupt one, it becomes something far worse, a debt in line to be repaid. Gift card holders weren't treated like customers anymore. In bankruptcy court, they became unsecured creditors standing behind banks, landlords, and suppliers in line to get paid back. By early 2018, Toys R Us announced it would liquidate every US store. Parents who'd loaded $50 or $100 onto a card were told their balance might simply vanish. Public pressure eventually forced Toys R Us to let customers redeem existing gift cards for a short final window, but only if they acted before the doors shut for good. Anyone who missed that window, or never heard about it, lost their money completely. The exact same float that once felt harmless became the reason they got nothing back. This is the core irony: Starbucks and Toys R Us both borrowed customer cash for free. One had the sales volume and stability to always pay it back. The other didn't. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next. So why did Starbucks' version of this trick become a fortune, while Toys R Us version became a scandal? The answer isn't luck. It's frequency. The average Starbucks customer reloads their app multiple times a month. The average Toys R Us shopper touched their gift card maybe once or twice a year. Frequency means Starbucks float never had to survive a long gap without new deposits flowing in. Toys R Us float depended on seasonal spikes around birthdays and December. And frequency wasn't the only difference. Starbucks entered the 2000s with almost no debt weighing it down. Toys R Us entered with billions in loans from its 2005 buyout. A debt-free company can survive a slow year. A company owing billions in interest cannot, no matter how much cash is quietly sitting in customers' prepaid balances. In 2018, Toys R Us shut down roughly 700 US stores at once. That same year, Starbucks was opening new locations at a pace of several a day worldwide. So the exact same accounting trick, free money from customers who prepay and don't fully redeem, turned into a golden engine for one company and a lawsuit magnet for the other. Starbucks still faces criticism over it. Consumer advocates have asked whether customers should get better protection for money sitting on an app they can't easily withdraw or transfer, especially since that balance can't simply be moved to a bank account like normal cash. But as of Starbucks' last public filings, that balance keeps growing every year, and the company keeps legally recognizing a slice of it as pure, unearned revenue. Think about your own phone right now. If you've ever used a Starbucks app, there's a good chance a few forgotten dollars are still sitting on it. That's not a glitch. That's not the app being outdated. That's the exact same float that turned into well over $1 billion, one small reload at a time. Meanwhile, in landfills and junk drawers across the country, expired Toys R Us gift cards are the physical leftovers of a float that ran out of time to pay back. Two companies, the same idea, the same era of American retail. One became one of the largest informal banks in the country. The other became a cautionary tale. The float isn't good or evil. It's just math, a bet that most people won't cash out what they're owed. Starbucks won that bet. Toys R Us lost it. Picture the two outcomes side by side: a barista handing over a coffee paid for entirely by money the company already spent months ago, versus a parent standing at a locked toy store door, holding a card that's now worth nothing but plastic. Same idea, opposite ending. That's the real lesson buried inside every gift card and every reloadable app. Next time you tap your phone to reload a balance, you're not just buying tomorrow's coffee. You're quietly funding one of the biggest unregulated cash piles in retail. So do you actually know how much money is sitting and used on your own gift cards and apps right now? Go check. You might be surprised.